Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight as we come together with unity and purpose. In these challenging times, we gather as united Ramaz community, coming together to offer our unwavering support, especially now as we express our love for both the people and the state of Israel. For all of us, the impact of recent events hits very close to home, with family members and close friends who have either suffered a loss or been called to serve. With this in our hearts, we extend our wishes for strength and resilience to every soldier and all the people of Israel. We hold in our thoughts those in captivity, fervently praying for their safe and swift return. For those who have died al Kiddush Hashem, we pray that their neshamot are at eternal peace. At the end of tonight's program, we will join together in reciting Tehillim and make a mishaberach for the Chayalim. Tonight presents us with a unique opportunity to deepen our understanding and gain greater clarity on the history of the Israel-Arab conflict, followed by a call to action, which will allow us to dwell on the what, rather than be brought down by the why. Throughout the presentations, all participants will remain muted. You can engage by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for Dr. Lekht or Julie Blinbaum Marcovici, who will address them at the end of their presentations. In the days ahead, we will continue to offer both in-person and virtual learning opportunities so that we come together as a united community. We warmly invite you to share your feedback and thoughts for future programming. Please consider sponsoring student Torah learning in the name of the Chayalim or in memory of those who we have lost. All of the sponsorships will go to support our Ahavat Yisrael programs in the school and the community. And now it is my privilege to introduce Rabbi Joshua Lookstein, Associate Head of School for Rabbinic Leadership, Jewish Life and Learning, who will be the moderator for this evening. Rabbi Josh.
Thank you, Kenny, and thank you for organizing this this evening. It is my honor to introduce our two presenters. First, Dr. Naya Lekht, and then afterwards, after the conclusion of Naya Lekht's presentation and Q&A, then we will hear from Julie Blinbaum Marcovici. And the subject is, as you know, Israel at War, Understanding the Basics and Beyond. Dr. Naya Lekht was born in the former Soviet Union and immigrated to the United States with her family in 1989. She received her PhD in Russian literature from UCLA, where she wrote her dissertation on Holocaust literature in the Soviet Union. Dr. Lekht has taught at both the collegiate and high school level, and in addition to being a passionate educator and joining the Ramaz Upper School's English department this year, Dr. Lekht writes, teaches, and speaks on the history of anti-Semitism and Zionism. She is also a columnist for the Jerusalem Post, where she writes on the Jewish experience in the American diaspora. Dr. Lekht, take it away.
Thank you, Rabbi Josh. Thank you so much for everyone to come together this evening for this very important topic. I am going to say a few things before I go into a little deep dive on the history. I want to first kind of lay out the obvious, and that is that we are not in Israel. We are here. And why I want to say that is because it's important to understand that we in the diaspora, in the American Jewish diaspora, are not facing the same existential threat. And we saw this. October 7th is a manifestation of an existential threat where a genocidal regime, Hamas, who masters of Iran, right? The masters are Iran, basically went out and killed, brutalized Jews. That was their mission. Now, we in the diaspora, thank God, don't have this existential threat. But I firmly believe that we are in a different type of battle, and our battle is the battle of ideology and narrative. And in order to win this battle of ideology and narrative, we must understand the history. It's nuanced, it's complicated, but there's a lot of black and white too. So I want to go right now and try to share my screen and really go into the history with you just a bit, because I don't want to speak too long. I would like to give the audience an opportunity to really ask the questions they want to ask. So as was said, the title of today's evening is Israel at War, Understanding the Basics and Beyond. I want to really focus our attention on three main aspects. And that is, we're not facing the existential threat that Israel is. So I'm kind of pivoting. What is it that is threatening us and our Jewish identity in the diaspora? And that is the framing, the narrative framing that is being used to delegitimize, demonize Israel. And that framing is the framing that compels one to look at the world through a lens in which there are two actors, oppressed and oppressors. And if you are going to look at the world through that lens, you are most likely going to be primed walking away, seeing that Israel is an oppressor. And we'll unpack that a little bit later. The second point that I want to discuss is, how do we treat this conflict? For a long, long time, we've been treating it as a land conflict. Tonight, I'm not going to basically answer that question. It's a big question. But the fact that we're asking the question itself, letting it surface and remain in the air, is itself an important thing to take stock of. So how do we treat this conflict? And Gaza, in particular, becomes an illustrative case study of treating this as a land conflict. And three, I'm not going to be making predictions geopolitically what is going to be happening in Israel, but I'd like to discuss what is going to be happening in America on many college campuses and many public high schools. What will Jewish students be facing? So framing the conflict. Already we're seeing violence is justified when a people is occupied. To end violence, we must end oppression. When people are occupied, resistance is justified. So what you're seeing right now is a framing of this entire conflict around the focal point of power. And so if you think about it for a second, most people go, well, yeah, if somebody's oppressed, right? The Palestinian Arabs don't have an army. They don't have their own sovereign state. Well, how are they supposed to fight the colonial entity being Israel in this case? Well, obviously, it's a lie that Israel is a colonial entity. But in itself, that language is so pregnant with a call to action. It's couched in such in almost a social justice lens that you, of course, want to be on the side of the underdog. But I urge us to re-examine that lens itself. Does oppression indeed lead to violence? And we don't have to look far. We have to look at our own story, the story of the Jewish people. We were kicked out of our ancestral homeland. For 2,000 plus years, we were wanderers, guests in other people's homes, in other people's lands. I come from the former Soviet Union. The story of Jews in Eastern Europe is a story of oppression. The story of Jews in Arab world, where they lived as dhimmis, was a story of oppression. My question to everyone tonight is, did Jews seek violence? Did Jews brutalize women, children, babies, elderly? I'm just asking this question because this type of framing is basically allowing the underdog to get away with immoral acts, because at the end of the day, morality is at stake. Humanity here is at stake. Second, let's go a little bit into the history. I'm giving you two maps because I believe that maps do indeed reveal story and ideology. I prefer the map on the left, but I also want to acknowledge the other map of Israel with more complex geopolitical borders. When we're talking about Gaza, I want to go through a very brief bullet point history of Gaza in relation to Israel. In 1948, when Israel declared independence, Ben-Gurion knew that his time was limited. The British were leaving that area because they couldn't deal with the fighting between the Arabs on the ground and the Jews. He knew that they were about to leave, and he decided to declare a state. He also knew that if he did declare a state, there would be a war. And indeed, We all know the first Arab-Israeli war, sometimes called the 1948 war, sometimes called the Independence War, ensued. What happened was 5 Arab countries attacked a fledgling Jewish state. The war lasted a little over a year. And what we have after the war, from the years 1949 to 1967, from 1949 to 1967, so about 17 years, we have Gaza was under the control of Egypt. And Judea Samaria, also known as West Bank, came under the control, might I add, illegally by Jordan. We are not going to be discussing Judea Samaria today. We're just going to be focusing on Gaza. So I want to make it very clear that between 1949 and 1967, those 17 years, there were no calls to free Palestine. There were no calls for rising against Egyptian oppression, Egyptian occupation, Jordanian oppression, Jordanian occupation. That's really important. That language surfaced only after Israel won back those lands through the Second War, which we're going to deal with, the Six-Day War. But I really want everyone to understand on this call, it's very important that the term free Palestine, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The idea that the Palestinians are occupied did not exist when these lands were controlled by fellow Arabs, which makes this, which it's a pause. Why? Why did they not call to free Palestine between 49 and 67? It's just a question. All right, and so I'm just going a little bit quickly in the history because I want to leave time for Q&A. The Second Arab-Israeli War, also known the Six-Day War, where Israel fought a defensive war. It was a defensive war because Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran, which according to international law is a casus belli. It's a declaration of war. Israel fights with its neighbors and triples in size. Indeed, it is true. In 1967 to 1968 to 1982, Israel is now in control of not just Gaza, but the entire Sinai Peninsula, the entire Judea Samaria, and the Golan Heights. Lots of students that I work with who are in college, professors tell them that, for instance, look at Israel. Look how colonial and imperial Israel is. It tripled its size. I mean, look, that's what they want. They want to grow their empire, their Zionist empire. So in 1982 comes a gentleman, a prime minister by the name of Menachem Begin, who happens to be a far-right leader and the founder of Likud. And he wants to make peace with Egypt. And so in 1982, Menachem Begin returns the entire Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, and offers Egypt Gaza, and Egypt does not want Gaza. Egypt does not want Gaza. They do not take it. So Gaza is now controlled by Israel. So from 1982, when Israel returns the entire Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt, and really, this was the first actual Arab-Israeli peace plan or a peace negotiation, was between Israel and Egypt, and it was a lasting peace. And even today, by the way, Egypt and Israel work very closely, very closely. We can discuss a little bit later because there are reports that Egypt may have even tipped Israel off about October 7th. I've been reading that Egypt was trying to tell Israel. So Egypt has been working very closely with Israel. Now back to our history, back to the unfolding events. 1982, Gaza is now Israel. Or really 1967, it's still Israel. In 2005, in the year 2005, Israel makes a move. The move is a unilateral disengagement. Now, when I work with students, I ask them, what does that mean to unilaterally disengage? To unilaterally disengage in this particular instance, it's not just the removal of military presence and political presence. Israel went one step further. And all of us who remember Gush Katif, all of us who remember the tears, the Jewish tears of Jews taking Jews out of their homes in Gaza from Gush Katif, remember that when Israel unilaterally disengaged from Gaza, it wasn't enough for the Arabs on the ground that they removed political forces and military forces. They wanted the Jews out. I'm going to, footnote and leave this again. I'm going to let another question surface and just leave it out there. What does that tell you for any future Palestinian Arab state if a Jew cannot live in it? Just to ponder over. The fact that they had to forcefully take Jews out in order for Arabs or the people on the ground in Gaza, the leadership, to be satisfied. So that happened in 2005. Between 2005 and 2006, there were intense fighting between two parties. The Fatah party, which controls the Judea Samaria, also known as West Bank, that's the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas. They hate each other. And they're always vying for who is going to actually represent the Palestinian Arabs. And who won in 2006? Hamas wins. Who is Hamas? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, most of you probably know this on this call tonight, that it is a terrorist organization. I just want to underscore that it is not Naya's opinion that Hamas is a terrorist organization. This is a matter of fact. We have the United States State Department. It's on the terrorist list. It is also on the terror list of many European countries, as well as the European Union. The Hamas was formed in 1987. And its roots go back to Muslim Brotherhood, which is a movement that was founded in Egypt. Muslim Brotherhood basically gave birth to Hamas, which is a terrorist arm of that Muslim Brotherhood movement. So in 2005 to 2006, there's intense fighting between these two Arab ruling parties, Fatah and Hamas wins. How they win? They claimed that there was a democratic election. To what degree it was truly democratic, I cannot speak on that level, but this is what they claim. So in 2006, Hamas takes over. That is important information because Hamas, as a terrorist organization, has a charter. We do not have to guess what Hamas wants. We don't have to try to look into their hearts or decipher their machinations. We're very lucky in many ways. They explicate exactly what it is that they want. If you go on Google and search up Hamas charter, granted, this Hamas charter constantly gets edited and evolves. One of the points, the first, if not the second point, is total annihilation of the Zionist entity, total annihilation of Israel. That's what they want. And they've been doing that ever since 2006. They've been sending rockets. They've been building tunnels. Now, I can almost hear the other perspective. I could almost hear my interlocutor who may be fed from news and may be telling me, well, fine, you did leave Gaza, right? But you guys, Israel instituted a blockade. You put a blockade on Gaza. You basically restricted Gaza. You suffocated them. And that's why Gaza is an open air prison. Well, wait a second, ladies and gentlemen. Israel did not institute a Gaza blockade in 2005. It did so in 2006 in reaction to Hamas, which told them straight out, our goal, our dream, our fantasy is to destroy you. But here's the other thing that people miss. When Israel in 2006 instituted a blockade, they did so together with Egypt. Gaza shares borders not only with Israel, it shares borders with Egypt. And so, but nobody is ever talking about the Egyptian blockade, right? Nobody talks about that. They talk about the Israeli blockade. And so what we've been having since 2006, since Hamas has been in power, is waves of terror, waves of rockets, summer cycles of rockets launched into Israel, tons of money, which is, we can talk about that, all the money that's been sent through humanitarian aid, through political, geopolitical bodies, the United Nations, Amnesty International, and the money, the corruption of this leadership of Gaza, that entire money is spent on ways and methods to kill Jews. If we had questions and were uncertain as to what are the goals of Hamas, October 7th answered those questions. Hannah Arendt, a German Jewish philosopher, covered the Eichmann trial and wrote on the banality of evil. Now, I don't agree with everything that Hannah Arendt herself wrote, But she said something very interesting about the nature of anti-Semitism. She said, anti-Semitism, from beginning to end, is genocidal. That's the aim of anti-Semites. It's genocidal. It's not that they want to exile the Jewish people, no, or enslave. The goal is annihilation. And we saw this on October 7th. And lest anyone think that this is about territory or land, the Hamas terrorists went inside sovereign Israel border. They didn't go to a settlement that's, let's say, contested settlement or contested disputed land. They went right into sovereign Israel and murdered, butchered children, women. We've seen these videos. As a woman, you can't unsee them. I don't know how I'm on time, but I do want to pause now. And I wanted to give that overview of the history because Gaza becomes a very instructive case study for answering the question, is this a land conflict? Is this about occupation? How has Israel been occupying Gaza since 2005? So that I'm going to leave with there, stop sharing and open it up to Q&A.
Okay, Dr. Lekht, we don't have any questions yet in the Q&A. So I think I think maybe people were pondering and are thinking, sorry. There's a first question. At the time Israel declared independence, what were the borders?
Great question. Great question. So borders in general, it's very interesting. So in 1948, when the UN partitioned British Mandate for Palestine, they partitioned. If you give me a second, I want to pull up this map because it's important. It's going to help us understand. Just to say, it's a good map. Oh, there it is. Okay. I'm going to pull it up so you can see. All right. 1 second. All right. Okay. This map right here. So in 1948, the partition plan. This was the partition plan between that the UN decided that they were going to divide this further into an Arab and a Jewish state. Now the orange is Arab, and the aqua green or light green would be Jewish. The Jews agreed and the Arabs disagreed. What that means regarding borders and international law, if you disagree to a border, that partition plan is non-binding. So if, let's say, I am the Arab, I'm the Jew, and you, Rabbi Josh, are the Arabs, and I say, yes, I accept this partition plan, and you say, yeah, I accept too. We shake, we sign documents, like a house deed, think of it like a land deed, and these become the borders. But because the Arabs did not agree, this idea of borders was completely nullified. They're not binding. So when you had the outbreak of the 1948 war, you had a war happening all over the place where there were no borders that were recognized at that time. Many times college students, what I hear is, oh, well, in 1948, the Jews attacked beyond the borders that were given to them by the UN. They went further and attacked. Well, that's not true because those borders are not, they're null. They're nullified. They're not real borders because the Arabs did not agree to those borders. I don't know if that helps answering the question, but that is really important for people to understand that because the Arabs had rejected this, the implication was that political borders didn't mean anything then.
Okay, there are a couple of questions that both deal with sort of what control Israel has over Gaza. So the first way it's phrased is, can you discuss the infrastructure that was left in Gaza when Israel pulled out and what Hamas did with it? And the next way is that news channels are reporting that Israel turned off water and electricity. Can you explain why or how Israel has control over these critical, this critical infrastructure?
Yeah, well, the first question is an easier one, so I'll go with the first question. Indeed, when Israel, as I said, remember in 2005, unilaterally disengaged, meaning completely left Gaza Strip, they did leave quite a bit of infrastructure, greenhouses, roads, for the Arabs to then take over and, continue to develop. They burned those infrastructures. They destroyed them. You can look this up. I've read about this. I've seen the pictures. So infrastructure was left and it was destroyed. Now, regarding the question of power and water, very interesting. By the way, I just read that Israel, yesterday morning, turned the water back. Before 2005, there was a meeting in the year 2000 at Camp David. President Bill Clinton, together with Palestinian Authority leader Yasser Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak met. And they met in order to finally solve this conflict. I don't know how many people on this call know. Israel offered Yasser Arafat 97% of Judea and Samaria / West Bank and all of Gaza and half of Jerusalem. And he walked away from that offer. And Bill Clinton could not wrap his head around it. It was the offer of the century. So what happened after they disagreed and didn't take this amazing offer comes in Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords are a certain kind of quasi step towards peace between the Palestinian Arabs and Israelis. One of the stipulations in the Oslo Accord is that the Israeli government must work with the Palestinian Authority. So they work together with the Palestinian Authority. But remember, the Palestinian Authority hate Hamas. And so who turns off the electricity? It's Palestinian Authority. But it's because they are working together with Israel. So it's very complicated. At the same time, in regards to water, there's an aqueduct that is not being used right now in Gaza. So the reason it becomes complicated is that there were many stipulations after the rejection of that peace plan set forth by Ehud Barak and mediated by President Bill Clinton. The Oslo Accords came in to be kind of a temporary peace between the Palestinian Arabs and the Israelis. There are many stipulations, as I say. One of them is that Israel has to work with the Palestinian Authority because, of course, Israel doesn't want to work with Hamas. So Israel's going to work with the Palestinian Authority. And so together with the Palestinian Authority, they do control the electricity, but people don't know that. And so it's really important to understand that.
Okay, thank you. So someone asked about the question that you sort of opened with, or one of your first questions that you didn't really answer. You sort of put it as a question. You mentioned that from the river to the sea, or free, free Palestine was not uttered when Egypt and Jordan were in control of the West Bank and Gaza. So the question that's posed here is, how would you respond to the argument that perhaps their fellow Muslim neighbors were not oppressors? But I guess the question is just, why do you, can you answer that question? Why is that?
But that's not exactly true, because when, for instance, not in the case of Jordan, but in the case of Egypt, when Egypt took over Gaza, they did not give citizenship. They kept the people on the ground in refugee camps. So I'm sorry, I don't buy that. And in regards, listen, what the Palestinian Arabs have been saying is, we want land, we want our own country, we want sovereignty, we want self-determination. But why do you only want it in 1969 and you didn't want it in 1959?
Okay. Someone asked, and now there are a lot of questions, so we're not going to get to all of them. Someone asked, I would like a better understanding of your statement that our existence is not in jeopardy.
What I'm trying to say is that we, at this point in time, I mean, I can't make predictions, but I think that Jews living in Israel today do not face the same existential threat that we Jews live in America or Canada and other parts of the world. Is there violence against Jews? Absolutely. Is there terrible anti-Semitism? But we're not awoken in a morning at 7 a.m. with a group of murderers who slaughter an entire Jewish village. Iran vocally, again, we don't have to guess. In my nature, one of my passions and interests is really understanding anti-Semitism, and so I do follow Khomeini on social media. Okay, I want to see what he writes. He's very clear. He wants Israel is a cancer that must be eradicated. Now imagine being an Israeli living in Israel, knowing that Iran, which has Hezbollah, by the way, stationed in the north, ready to go when Iran tells them to go. Hamas, which we're seeing is controlled also by Qatar and Iran. I think that we're not facing the same existential threat. I do not think that we do. And the reason that I stress that is because our war is a war of words. Our war is a war of a battlefield of ideas, a battlefield for truth. And that's where I think we need to focus our attention on here in the United States of America.
Okay, another question. What do you say when someone points out that Begin used violence, obviously before he was prime minister? But how do you handle Begin's violence versus the current violence?
Yeah, but Begin's, well, it's completely incomparable because Begin did not target civilians. In addition to that, Begin sent notices ahead of time. It's just incomparable.
Okay.
I mean, I don't.
Okay. There are questions. I don't know, Dr. Lekht, I don't know how knowledgeable you are about Israel's intelligence, but there are some questions sort of that have to do with that. I'm going to stay away from that.
I'm sorry, I don't have. I'm a historian. I'm a literary scholar, and so I can analyze situations, but I can't make predictions.
Okay. Okay. Do you have sort of at your fingertips a rundown of how many times the Palestinians did not take an offer that was on the table?
Oh yes, I have at my fingertips, and here we go. All right. 1937 was the Peel, the real, okay, so it depends, I teach students, how do we tell our stories? Stories, where do you begin? Where do you begin telling the story of the modern state of Israel, the Jewish people? And similarly, when do we begin to tell the story of these cycles of rejection? For me, I begin in 1937 with the Peel Commission report. In 1937, British Mandate of Palestine, the custodians who were overseeing the mandate were the Brits. And they were noticing the festering violence, the Arab revolts, the Hebron massacre of 1929. They were realizing that it's getting to the point where it's uncontainable. So they went and they sent out British intelligence or British general and to scout the land and understand what's happening. And they proposed the Peel Commission. So the Peel Commission is 1937, and Arab League representatives from Arab leagues came to England and rejected that. So that's rejection number one. UN partition plan is rejection number two. You can read 2000 Camp David is rejection number three. Ehud Olmert also gave 94% of Judea and Samaria in 2008. That would be rejection number 4. If you want to count the Trump peace plans, that was in 2020. That's rejection number 5. And 2005, it's interesting that nobody offered the Arabs, here, you can have Gaza. Israel made the choice for them and left. It wasn't like, here you go. Do you want Gaza? Yes, yay or nay. But Gaza, for me, is also a rejection in many ways of a land for peace. So I count 6 easily. I've heard others count 9. I count 6. But I begin with the Peel Commission of 1937.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll do one more question for now, and it's just a small one, and it's asked twice. I'll give it to you sort of both. I'm sure we can handle this in the last 5 minutes that we have. What is there to say? I mean, the first way it's asked is, why does anti-Semitism exist? And the second one is a little bit more specific, which is, what is there to do about the rampant anti-Semitism in this country right now, and sort of where do we go from here?
In the last 5 minutes.
3 minutes, 4 minutes.
Okay. It's a very deep question. I speak at many schools. I speak with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and I will never forget, I was in Los Angeles and I was speaking at a Orthodox school, a Jewish Orthodox school, and it was about anti-Semitism. And I asked the kids, have you ever experienced it? And the boys told me that when they go walking on Shabbat with their kippah, people stop the cars and go, hey, can you take that off so we can see your horns? And this boy was, I think, very shocked by what he heard his fellow peers say. He raised his hand and he said, why do they hate us? Which is what they call, why do they hate us so much? I have several answers. I think, and I think a rabbi would be better to answer this, but I think that Jews brought into this world ethical monotheism. I think the Jewish people brought into this world a standard that was much higher. I think that we uplifted the world, but think about it in terms of a classroom. I mean, we're that student that always messes up the curve because we brought to this world another way of living, a different morality, and people don't want to do that. I mean, so that's it's a different answer than what I would normally give. Why is there anti-Semitism? I think a weak answer is because, we're the scapegoat, we're the proverbial other. I don't think that that's enough. I think, for instance, in Germany, the Jews were not the other. The Jews were very successful in Germany. In the 1920s, Jews held very successful positions. They were very assimilated and spoke German very well. So I don't think the answer is that we are the other and a convenient scapegoat. I think it's deeper than that. I think it's that we brought to this world an ethical monotheism, that it's like a mirror to civilization of where they have to be.
Thank you for the 4-minute answer to an age-old question. We'll wrap up this part, Dr. Lekht, with one final question, which I think is sort of question for further thought, which is, what books do you suggest for us to get more insight?
The best book that I've ever read is not by an academic. It's Why the Jews by Joseph Telushkin and Dennis Prager. The Longest Hatred. I've also really respect the work of Robert Wistrich. He's a historian. I forget the titles of his book. Anti-Judaism by David Nirenberg is another really important work. But those are the 3, I would say, seminal texts: is the Joseph Telushkin, Dennis Prager, Why the Jews. basically they together attempt to answer what you all, well, whoever had asked that question, why. Robert Wistrich approaches it as a historian, and David Nirenberg also is a historian, but he's taking a look at how it evolves, how this anti-Semitism evolves. So those are the three authors that I would suggest.
Okay. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Lekht. We appreciate it. I don't know if there'll be any questions at the end that for you, but we really appreciate this part of the program. I received, while you were speaking, I received some side chats. Excuse me, that expressed how great people think that you are and your presentation has been, and how lucky Ramaz is to have you as on its faculty. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to now present the second presenter, and that is Julie Blinbaum Marcovici. Julie is AIPAC's Senior Director for the Northeast and is responsible for building and empowering the pro-Israel leadership in New York City and Long Island, and mobilizing key activists in support of AIPAC's efforts in Washington. Julie joined AIPAC having worked on numerous presidential, statewide, and local campaigns. She has also served in the White House as the Vice President's Associate Director of Political Affairs. Julie received her bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Pennsylvania and graduated from Ramaz in 2002. She is also a proud Ramaz parent of 2 children. And Julie is going to, as Mr. Rockland described it, instead of the way my father has been presenting this of after the ideas of Rav Soloveitchik, instead of asking why, we should be asking what now. So Julie, what can we do now?
Rabbi Josh, thank you so much for having me, Mr. Rockland. I have to tell you, when you called me, I thought this was going to be a small group of people. I actually just came from the Holocaust Memorial Museum dinner around the corner from my office. The other half of Ramaz is there, honoring the Borens and Distenfelds and their amazing, amazing work. But I literally had to wait until somebody got off of this Zoom because it was maxed out at 300 people, and I had to wait till someone dropped off to get on. It is a tremendous testament to the Ramaz and KJ communities to have 300 people on a Zoom here tonight. It feels like there's been a cloud over our heads this past 8 days, and it's just hard to believe the moment we're in and where we find ourselves as American Jews, and watching, our brothers and sisters in Israel grapple with these dark, dark times. And a lot of times there's a feeling of helplessness that can set in. And I'm here to tell you there is so much we can be doing, and I implore you to join me in that. And people in this community are doers. I mean, it goes without saying that we as American Jews, we have a solemn responsibility to take care of Israelis in Israel. Our community has done so much for Israelis over the past week and a half. When you look at what we have done to make sure Israelis have the medical treatment, the mental health care, the supplies, people who've been pulled from their homes, that they have everything that they could need, and that Israel's troops have everything from chargers to socks to its supplies. It's been tremendous to see the outpouring support of this community. My job, in addition, while everybody is making sure that we are taking care of Israelis, to make sure that we are also taking care of Israel. And that is what we do at AIPAC. American support for Israel is critical in this time and in this place. We have a responsibility as American Jews to use our political capital to fight. And we have voices, and we need to do something critically important. There are really 3 things that we need to do as American Jews, and that only America can provide to Israel right now. That's America as our country, as our government. The first is time, the second is space, and the third is resources. Israel needs to be able to fight this battle, and it needs the time and the space to complete that mission. and it needs the resources to do that. And when I say resources, I mean money, but I also mean the weapons, the precision-guided munitions, the Iron Dome resupply, the interceptors, the regular munitions, advanced weaponry. This is a war that's not going to go on for weeks, but months, and we need to be there throughout that process. These are things that only the United States can provide. Over the last 8 days, we've seen nearly wall-to-wall support from American leadership. Whether you love or hate this administration, President Biden, Vice President Harris, Secretary Blinken, Secretary of Defense Austin, they have shown unwavering support. Secretary Blinken's traveled to Israel, where he's meeting with Israeli leadership. Biden has announced he's going to be going on Wednesday. Secretary Austin actually sent the most advanced carrier group in the U.S. Navy, the USS Gerald Ford, to the Eastern Mediterranean. It's now being joined by the USS Eisenhower carrier group. And they are to send a very, very clear sign to Iran and its proxies not to get involved in this war. We've seen unequivocal and daily affirmations from every level of this government, and that's been joined by tremendous support from Capitol Hill. In the first 36 hours after this attack, 96% of members of Congress made a strong statement affirming Israel's right to self-defense and standing unequivocally with her. That is tremendous. And that's been only added to with a House resolution earlier this week, led by Congressman Meeks and McCall, standing with Israel. 422 original co-sponsors out of 435 members of Congress. The Senate offered up a similar resolution the other day with 76 senators on the first day. These are unprecedented numbers, and they are a product of decades of work building relationships with each and every one of these members of Congress and taking them to Israel. That's our model. But here's the thing. The amazing support that America has provided Israel over these first 8 days is not something that we can count on to continue. The tide of we've seen this so many times, the tide of public opinion will inevitably change. I mean, we've already seen it. The images coming out of Gaza that are plastering the news, the stories, and the front pages of the newspapers, all this does is put additional pressure on these key leaders and members of Congress. The public opinion in the United States and international pressure takes a toll. And that is real. And listen, we are going to have to get used to this. We're going to hear condemnations, things like Israel is indiscriminately bombing civilian infrastructure. Israel's response is disproportionate. We should call for an immediate ceasefire. Congresswoman Cori Bush, a squad member, already put forward a resolution today calling for a ceasefire. In this environment, we are going to have to do some important things, and it's not going to be easy. Most critical of those is going to be passing what we call an emergency supplemental bill. And we, of course, need to make sure that there's leadership in Congress to do it. A Speaker of the House would be nice so we can get things moving. But it's in this environment, with these headlines, with this additional international pressure and the change in public opinion, that we are going to have to make sure that Israel has everything that she needs. The administration's done a phenomenal job. Every hour on the hour, cargo planes land in Israel with American ammunition, interceptors, but there's only a certain amount that the president can actually authorize unilaterally. For a large majority of the things that Israel will need over the weeks and months, Congress will have to step in, just like it did for Ukraine, and pass an emergency supplemental bill. And that's really to the tune of billions of dollars. That's for ammunition, precision-guided munitions, advanced weaponry, additional funding. And it is going to be a challenging environment. Now, when you look at Congress, sort of the way I think about it, there are a core group of members of Congress who are going to be with us all the way. There is a group of 13 or so squad and squad adjacent members that will be against us no matter what. But a majority of members of Congress, they want to stand with us, they want to be with us, but they want to know that there is political safety in doing so. And that is our challenge. That is where we come in, and that is where our role truly is in the coming weeks and months. Our role is activism, and our role is resources. So there are two things that I implore you to do today, and I'm going to throw them in the chat right here just to make it easy for you. And we've got a lot of information here, so give me a second. Okay. The first thing is contact your members of Congress. The thank you, the hakarat hatov is so important. These members of Congress need to know that we stand with them, we're watching them, we appreciate them, and they need to hear from us regularly. Whether it's thank yous, whether this is a new resolution, a piece of legislation that we would like to see them co-sponsor and ultimately vote on, they need to be hearing through us throughout this process. So the best way to do that is to get out your cell phones. So I will wait for a second as everybody pulls those out. You're going to open up the text message function on your phone, and we're going to make this really easy. Because if you send this one text message, you're going to get prompts on a regular basis throughout this war. Whenever there is an action alert that your member needs to be contacted, you're going to get a link. It takes 30 seconds to complete the action alert, and it generates emails into your House members' offices, your senators' offices, and the president's office as well. And each message is adjusted, whether it's a call to action, whether it's a thank you, it's adjusted for that member and where they stand on those issues. So you're going to take out your phones, you're going to send a text message, you're going to send it to the numbers 24722. Again, that's sending a text message to the number 24722. And then you're going to send in the text message, in the message itself, the word Israel.
Julie, if you've, I don't mean to interrupt you, but if you've already signed up, I assume you don't have to sign up again. Meaning if you, or do it
you're
anyway.
not going to get double the messages, so it can't hurt.
Okay.
There is no downside to this. And if nothing else, it'll prompt you again to send a message right now to contact your members of Congress and contact the president. This is a crucial part of the process. The second thing that we are going to need to do, especially with this group in the middle, who are looking for this political safety, who are looking for the cover here, is going to steal the spines of those members of Congress. And the way that we do that is by direct contributions to those members of Congress in a pro-Israel context, to show that we are supporting them because of their stance on Israel. It's especially true about those in leadership and those who are in key decision-making positions. So for example, people who are on the Appropriations Committee, people who are on the Appropriations subcommittees that handle these issues as well. These are key people that need to hear from us, and they need to see the dollars flowing in through the pro-Israel space. And what we actually make possible through our portal, through the AIPAC portal, is the ability to give contributions to these members of Congress, large or small, but with a pro-Israel message. So you'll see the second link there, that's contribute to pro-Israel candidates. What you're seeing right now, if you click through to that, is 10 members of Congress, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. Now, you can give to each one of them is important for their own reasons, and I can sort of go through it, but I don't think we need to today. You'll have to just trust me on this one. These are all key leaders who will make the difference in the billions of dollars that will go to Israel, the weapons it contains, and the timeline in which this is completed. You may choose, if you're a Republican, to only give to Republicans. You can choose only to give to Democrats. I would suggest giving to both if you're open to it. Numbers large and small make a difference. But any dollar that you give politically through this portal is basically stamped with a pro-Israel message that says, we are contributing to you because of your support for Israel. The best example I can sort of give of the efficacy of this, if this makes sense, and I don't like to use her name as a rule of thumb, is there's a specific member of Congress from upstate New York. She's a Republican. She was a never Trumper. And during the impeachment hearings, she basically asked one of the people testifying a question because his comment was sort of silly, and it was perceived to be pro-Trump. In the wake of that, Trump supporters sent her tons of likes and tweets thanking her. And then they started making small dollar and large dollar contributions to her campaign. And she saw this massive surge. And all of a sudden she saw, well, it's politically expedient to support Trump and to come out in this way. And she literally now drives the Trump train. Now, we are not asking members of Congress to pull a 180. This is not going to get squad members to change their view on Israel or what's going on in the region. But in terms of stealing the spines of these members of Congress, this is a critical way to send a message that we stand with those who stand with Israel.
Thank you, Julie, very, very much.
Yeah, I just have to say, it's it's an important time, and it's a simple task. It's making sure that America does not waver, that we don't go wobbly. And this is something that everyone can do. I hope that you will understand that this is in our hands. This is an effort that we can and will be successful in, but we will only be successful if we do it together as a community. So I appreciate you giving me the time, and I appreciate what you've done, what you will do. I appreciate you spreading the word on this. Take these links, please, if you have groups that you're involved in, whether it's WhatsApp groups, schools, shuls, whatever your community looks like. I'm happy to, and we can also send out some language as well, but encouraging people to participate in this action alert. Text Israel to 24722 and to start making these contributions as well. If you revisit this website later on next week, next month, you'll see we're changing up the members of Congress as these people get significant amounts of support. But these are critical ways in which we can make our voices heard, participate in the process, and ensure that this goes successfully. Last but not least, I want to invite you guys to get involved in this, because for AIPAC activists who are involved day in and day out, this is a way of life. We build relationships with members of Congress. We are able to take our seats at the table. Many of you on this call are involved with MidPAC, one of the political networks it brings together a lot of people in the Ramaz KJ community to host members of Congress on a regular basis. If you're not involved already, I encourage you to get involved. Now is the time. Talk to Richard Linhart. They have an amazing, amazing crew that comes together. They're actually hosting an important senator this coming Sunday in the community at Jerry Kestenbaum's house. But there are constant events where you can not only text or send a message, but actually show up and participate in that conversation with members of Congress. So please, I've left my contact information in the chat. I invite you to join us on Sunday, ping me, we'll get you all set up. I invite you to join us in the work. I invite you to invest if this is something that you find meaningful. I imagine if you're on this call, Israel, something that is deeply important to you. But I look forward to partnering with all of you in the weeks and months to come, because we will express Jewish power when Israel and the Jewish community need it most, as proud Americans standing with Israel.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm getting side chats about you as well. You two are very appreciated. Can I ask you, there's actually a couple of questions, but one sort of technical one, which is
Sure.
for Canadians. Apparently there are Canadians who are on this Zoom. For Canadians, will the texts generate something for their prime minister's office, or is this strictly a United States of America?
Strictly in the United States, but we can help you find that contact info to send those messages in of Hakarato where appropriate, and we'll absolutely help you find those avenues.
Okay, and then a final question, which is there's a question about Israel's PR and sort of either why aren't we working on it, or what is AIPAC doing in this area, and if it's not AIPAC, then who is?
This is an age-old question. I don't think I ever speak without getting this question. AIPAC's model is to go directly to the decision makers, directly to the people in Washington who influence policy, the 535 members of Congress, the administration, key administration officials. For us, we go directly to the source, and then we look to the people in the immediate circles around them that are influencing them. The task of changing public opinion is daunting, and I know it's one that Israel takes seriously, and I actually do have to say that I think that they've been improving on somewhat. If you follow the IDF on Twitter, their rapid response teams, their ability to get out information about strikes, about how and why they do things, and I think that PR coming out of Israel is vastly improved, but it's got a long way to go, and there are institutional issues within the media that actually account for this. I don't know if I can find the article right now, but Mati Friedman wrote an amazing article in The Atlantic a number of years ago about what accounts for this. And it's it's an uphill battle that's not going to be solved anytime soon. And it's not a question of getting a great PR team involved.
Okay, thank you, Julie. And thank you, Dr. Lekht, again. Excuse me. This was really extraordinary. It was extraordinary to hear both of you. It was extraordinary, I think, for everybody who was on to really feel like this was just very value added. And I think it really added to the way everybody is processing these last 8 days, as you referred to them. So we're going to end, before I hand it back over to Kenny. We're going to end by reciting the prayer for the well-being of Israeli soldiers, and finally with saying a parak of Tehillim. Because we have Dr. Lekht, we have Julie Blinbaum Marcovici, and we have our soldiers, and we have Hashem. Not necessarily in that order. But we, at this point, especially we who live in America, are trying to use whatever resources we have and use whatever pathways and avenues we have. And so we are going to use those. I'm going to say this doesn't always work so well on Zoom, but I am going to say the Shir HaMa'alot. We'll say it responsively. I will say one verse and you will say the next. I'll just wait a little bit while you say it. And this Shir HaMa'alot, Psalm 126. There's a lot of reasons to say this. The one I think that jumps out at me at this moment is about the 8th line down, or 3 lines from the end. Hazorim b'dim'a berina yiktzoru, which is those who seed in sadness, in despair, will reap in gladness. And I think that's, we're in that period right now of sadness, and we would like it to change as quickly as possible to gladness. So we will say this Shir HaMa'alot, followed by the Mishberach L'Chaylei Tzahal. Shir HaMa'alot, B'shuv Adonai et Shivat Zion, Hayinu Kecholmim. Higdil Adonai la'asot imanu, hayinu semechim. Hazorim b'dim'a berina yiktzoru. Haloch yelechu v'cho nosei meshech hazara, bo yavo berina nosei alumotav. And now you're welcome to say the Mishaberach L'Chaylei Tzahal along with me if you would like. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak v'Yaakov, v'yivarech et Chayalei Tzavah Ha'agana Yisrael, ha'omedim al mishmar artzeinu v'arei Eloheinu, migavul halavanon v'yad midbar Mitzrayim u'min hayam hagadol, ad levo ha'arava b'yabasha ba'avir u'vayam. Yitein Adonai et oyeveinu hakamim aleinu nigafim lifneihem. Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yishmor v'yatzil et chayaleinu mikol tzara v'tzukah u'mikol nega u'machala v'yishlach bracha v'hatzlacha b'chol ma'asei yedeihem yad ber soneinu tachtehem v'aterem b'cheter Yeshua u'v'ateret nitzachon v'kuyam bahem hakatuv Ki Adonai Elohechem haholech imachem lehilachem lachem im oivechem lahoshia etchem v'nomar amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Joshua Lookstein. Thank you, Naya Lekht. Thank you, Julie Blinbaum. This has been an evening that, for all of us, I can say for myself, is tremendously needed at a moment like this. We are always trying to understand what has been surrounding us. And Naya, you helped us to really grasp and understand in a much greater way what we're dealing with. And Julie, again, you really did give us the what. And I, for one, am very grateful to now have more to even do. And on that very note, I want to say to everyone that's left on this Zoom this evening, please stay tuned for the what. As a community, we are very much involved in the what. We're trying to send out and involve as many of you as possible in the things that we're doing. Get involved, bring supplies that are needed, do the things proactively that are being asked of you to do. Let us know if you have projects you want us to think about and undertake. We are here as a community, and we stand that much stronger when we are together. We'll be having more opportunities to come together. Please look out in your emails and in the various ways that we communicate. And we look forward to hopefully having moments of celebration in the near future where we're able to have Zooms or in-person gatherings for happiness, for good things, and to celebrate all that we've accomplished as a community. Wishing you all a wonderful night and hopefully good news to come. Take care.